So how did you get the job here in the first place, and what was your experience before you came here?
Well, I did a music technology degree at Kingston University.
Oh, right.
But it was mainly music back then. But there's a bit of technology thrown in.
What instrument did you play?
Euphonium.
Blimey.
Yeah, brass band instrument of that's a beautiful instrument. But so I played that I was really good actually, and then I lost that when I started here. Really, I was like I played it all the way through university and sang at university, and then.
Did you play piano as well?
No, a little bit, not very well. I was kind of mainly music, but my father's a musician. So
really?
He was a sax player and Van de Graaff generator.
Blimey, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I've got a few Van de Graaff generator LPs. Yeah. Fantastic.
So that's my kind of upbringing. So there's that. But I kind of completely rebelled against his. He rebelled against in the the 60s, 70s kind of drugs and rock and roll.
Yes.
And I kind of rebelled against that and went for like brass band and quite straight. So.
That's fantastic. So rebelling against Van de Graaff generator by joining a brass band.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
That takes get your head around that for a minute.
But, I think I'm not sure how happy he was at that stage, but now he's obviously thrilled that where I am now. So that was.
What's he up to these days then?
He does music therapy.
Oh,
he's
brilliant.
Like kind of old progressive rock style of music therapy.
I think I've seen the stuff about him on the interwebs.
Maybe,
I remember looking a couple of years ago.
He's quite David Jackson. He's quite he's well known in his field.
Yes, I do remember seeing.
He's amazing. He's totally nuts, and he's totally nutty, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, fantastic.
So then I did some university, did the degree.
So did you start at an early age then? Did you have euphonium lessons?
Oh, it was at junior school, yeah. So Fred tenor horn first, and then
tenor horn. That's the one that always gets
age 9, exactly. And then
they want to fill the numbers in the brass band.
Exactly.
We definitely need some more tenor horns.
So did that, and then I just played on from that,
right.
And then obviously listened to music from I was on the side of the stage at 6 months in Italy, with the Defenders on, so and probably whilst pregnant, so my mum was pregnant, so I've always been around music. Yeah, exactly, totally ingrained. So I'm trying to do that the same for my child.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of Mozart symphonies on in the car. Yeah.
That's not that could be Van de Graaff generator. It worked for me. So that was that, and then I worked at a small voiceover studio in town, called Soundbite, where we were doing a computer game kind of audio and comedy stuff.
So were you interested in the technology then?
Because the music degree was technology at university, so it was music stroke technology. But back in those days, it was a 8.5-inch 16-track tape machine. It was and a couple of small desks and a bit of recording. It was good fun.
Yeah.
But then we did a soundtrack. We did a thing where we had to replace a soundtrack of a movie as one of our coursework.
Right.
And I really enjoyed that a lot. So then when I kind of got a job here, I was like. Suddenly this kind of film world just opened up, and I was like...
So how did you get the job here? Did you just write in? Or?
I think my CV might have gone in to the top of a pile with a recommendation from somebody who worked at Chrysalis, I believe, how I understand it. But I still had to come and interview, and I don't think I got the job to begin with. I think somebody else had the job.
Right.
It lasted about a week, and then I was the next one down.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
So, thank you to that person who couldn't hack it. Thank you very much indeed, because who knows where I'd be now. But that was it, and I fell in love with the place immediately. It was hard living out those early years, but they were amazing. They were amazing years, working on Hollywood movie after Hollywood movie, and just incredible.
So when you first started there, were you sort of running first of all?
Running. Yeah. I was running. That was back in the old days where studios could afford 2 runners, 4 assistants. Yeah. So there was 2 runners, and we were runners, and it was great. Because it would be runners stroke second assistant. So you'd run the DAT machine. So it'd be running the DAT machine on the sessions and doing all the running stuff, doing all the cabling and hard work and learning as well. Really, totally. It was the long. The film side of things is a long slog into learning, which is fantastic when you get to where I am now, because you just learn so much.
So presumably you learned about note taking and things like that.
Note taking and mic positions, really. Once you got the things you do.
Who were you assisting? Was it Jeff and
Jeff, Nick, and then also American engineers as well.
Right.
But when I was assisting, Sean Murphy, Dennis Sands, the gurus of film music scoring, these guys, big American guys, and that was the first American one of those where you kind of turn up and they had to ride the click and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the good thing about when you were second assistant was you used to do things like do the percussion mics, because that would be something you'd have to go and change all the time. So you'd run out and you'd be in charge of just they'd give you the responsibility of just recorded percussion mics.
Okay.
Which is great. So you got out there and you got to know the musicians and you know out there and fixing headphones and that kind of thing. So you were embroiled into the musicians and then learning that way.
Yeah.
And then the setups, of course, everyone's setup was different. So it was learning that way, learning what you liked the sound of and what you didn't like the sound of.
I mean, the whole thing is just to me incredibly scary. With the few film sessions I've witnessed, I just find the whole. I remember going into studio, the hall actually, going into the control room in the hall when David Arnold was doing some James Bond stuff. We were sort of, I don't know, something broke in studio one, so we had 2 hours while I fixed it. And we came and watched David Arnold recording, and it was all surround sound. And they were plunging 2 MTR 90s, all 48 tracks into record.
That would have been me, I expect.
Possibly was, yeah.
Probably was, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty scary.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, I mean the first few times, God blimey, you just write down the numbers, make sure triple, quadruple check the tack number before you went into record. God, that was it. Make sure you're on the sync head. Make sure everything was in record, because they had everything was the tape machine was on pneumatic, and it was there was lots of things to remember. You had to make sure that the capstan wasn't resolved and it was wild, and it was there was so many things to remember to do, but you just got into a zone and it was fun. It was dropping in on 48 tracks was interesting. Had to do that a couple of times. It was a good story about when I was doing it for Hannibal, the movie Hannibal with Hans Zimmer, and the engineer said when the drop in was impossible. Hans said the drop in was possible. So it went. It was looked over to me. It was like, so what do you reckon? I was like, I'll give it a go. What we got to lose? Hans is saying do it, so I'm going to do it. And I did it, and it worked perfectly. And the engineer was very nice over the talk back to all the orchestra, saying it was good. But though, doing 2 drop-ins at 50 nips as well. Both hands. The right hand was easy. The left hand trying to get in time was. God. So
the machines would be synced, or they just
they would be for drop-in. They'd be synced. Yeah. With the links, they'd be synced up with the pneumatic and all locked up and capsules resolved. So you'd have to give it quite a long run up. Then they'd have to start playing, and then it would be like a normal drop-in, but they'd all be resolved together. But then when you were recording fresh, everything would be wild. There'd be no capsules involved. You just record it, it with the pneumatic timecode being the master timecode. But then when you'd have 20 seconds of pre-roll, orchestras used to love it. You used to love it because they would sit there for 15 seconds before they had to play.
Put their feet up,
Now it's like 2 seconds after we finish recording, let's do the next take, next take, and then it's like it's completely, it's just the way it goes.
You'd think the Musicians Union would try and ban Pro Tools.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But
they probably do.
Well, it was literally the moment Pro Tools came involved. The first time we used it was on Gladiator.
Right.
That was my first using it. We still recorded the tape, and then it was like you run this, and I was like, okay. I suddenly realised that this is amazing. Yeah. Because it was just you could just see how amazing it was going to be because you could edit. And it was for me it was great because I was assisting for about 9 years, and you do once you've done it for a few years you kind of know what you're doing and you get a bit cocky and you're just like I know what I'm doing. Yeah. But Pro Tools came along and it was great because it suddenly opened up a whole new world of being able to edit as you were recording further down the timeline. You could edit the previous thing. So then we did a playback. They go, okay, we just need to. Can you just put that? I've done it already. And I haven't done that, or I've done that as well. And then you do a playback, and it was like that was for me a great way of.
Yeah. So while it's in record,
you can
scroll back and look at.
You could do an edit and just clean it up. So if there's something, or if you're doing an overdub, you could be fixing the orchestra so that it just became a way of just to see how useful the tool was going to be. So. There's myself and a guy called Chris Barrett here. We just kind of realised how useful we could be, and if we could do all these things, whilst it became invaluable. And it was like that then became we need you or Chris, and that was that was our way of making ourselves invaluable to sessions.
Yeah, and I mean the thing that with a film session, presumably, there's an awful lot going on and a lot to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you kind of as an assistant, I think, well, it's different as an engineer, isn't it? I think as an assistant. I always thought my main role was to really just concentrate, make sure that
the job you've been given.
Yeah, because if you screw that up, then it's an expensive mistake.
Yeah.
Then you've got the good thing about you have a second assistant, so they can be in charge of making sure that the headphones are the orchestra happy and all that kind of stuff, and you're just there to do that. And hopefully the engineer is in charge of the desk, and if something goes wrong, then you come out of your little bubble and go and help the engineer. But that was the kind of, then as you get more experience, you can then help out. And the American side engineers would get you to ride the click as well.
Yeah.
So that would be a real. That would suddenly get you really. Those were the days where you really were concentrating, and it was like, you know, because we had to just because you had to do everything else you were doing, but then also ride the click, and it became a. I'm happy now I'm an engineer.
That must be a hard job as well, riding the click, because you got to. I mean, how do you?
You just have to
judge it?
No, just have to listen to
how loud
well, as an engineer now, I read the score, so having that is perfect, because you can write yourself a little scribble if you know there's a loud bit over the third of the page, or just see what's coming up, and then if you make a mistake, it's your fault as well, which is the thing. If you make if you have to say, look, we need to do that again because I've kept the click too loud, then you can put your hand up as an engineer and say that. As an assistant, it's kind of like, oh no, what have I done?
And what's the source of the click these days?
It's a Euro click from Pro Tools.
Right.
Generally it's a MIDI file, then we convert it into a click, and that's it. It's generally the Uri sound, because it doesn't bleed so much.
The Uri sound? What's that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an old machine that said Uri on the front. It's a Uri click.
Wow.
UREI. It's like the company. Yeah. So it's not like it hasn't got too much top end. So it's quite. When it's loud, it kind of almost thumps.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that. Doesn't bleed all over the headphones as much. It does, but not as much.
Right. Blimey. So who would you say you learned the most from during your assisting years? Was it Jeff?
I worked with Jeff a lot, and I learnt some things from him. I learnt a lot from Nick Woolidge. Simon Rhodes at Abbey Road, really respected him. He was my kind of idol, really. And then some of the American guys. Yeah. So the guys here, and then Abbey Road guys, and then the American guys were great, because you had much more responsibility with those guys, because they'd say, set up the room as you would do for the room, because they don't know it. And they'd say, okay, well, I want these microphones, but you just set it up, and that was fantastic, because suddenly the onus is on you to make it right, and so you can sit there and go, okay, that sounds good. No, I won't do that next time, or that kind of thing. It's their responsibility, but you kind of knew that you had a quite important input into it as well.
And did you see these projects through to the mixing stage, or
sometimes depended on things. Sometimes I really enjoyed the recording, so often we'd get it set up and pass the mixing on. Often the mixing in American projects would go back to America to mix. They'd record in the UK and mix over there. But of course, we mixed plenty of Bond films and all those other. Absolutely, yeah. And half the time would be probably about half and half was recording, half and half was mixing.
So what happens during a film mix of an orchestral thing then? Are you aware of other sounds that are going to be dubbed on later, or do you just mix it to sound great, or do you...
For me, when I do quite a lot of mixing for TV and for film now, so I always make sure you have as much of the dialogue and sound effects as possible, and I try and set the music fader at 0, and even though that's going to be too loud for against the dialogue, but mix it around that so that the dub mix has got less work to do,
right?
Rather than slam the mixes all the time, make it all, use every single bite of the mix. I don't try to do that. It's not all about compression. It's all about making space for the music so that when it gets loud, it's getting loud for a reason. So I always, it's got to sound great, because most of the time it goes onto a CD and people hear it. And also when you're mixing it, all you're hearing is the mix, so it's got to sound great. And
how much fiddling is necessary with an orchestral recording? Do you have to sort of go through and turn up the flute solos a bit? Sometimes,
yeah. I mean, these days there's not generally, very rarely, just a pure orchestral score. There'll be some piano, or there'll be some overdubs. Nowadays there's much more overdubs, because you can do that, and it's cheaper generally to do that. And there'll be some synths. But if you're talking pure orchestral, then I tend to give myself a few different options. So you'll have like a room sound, which would be the tree, the outriggers, the ambience, and maybe some like kind of mid microphones that are kind of tree kind of height, but spread out around the orchestra, and that's a kind of nice overall pickup, and that's what you listen to in the recording session, and almost classical style, but a bit more flexible than that. And then everyone then listens to that, and then if you need to make a balance for a solo, then you ask the player to play louder or the orchestra to play more quietly, and then you also record the spot mics, sectional mics, spot mics, depending on. I don't like to have too many spot mics, so I have maybe 2 or 3 on per instrument on the string section, maybe 1 per pair of the woodwinds, kind of 1 mic for the trumpets, 1 mic for the low brass. But I like to have the overall mics, because it just gives a sense of musicianship, really.
Yeah.
And then so then you'll, of course, then if there's a flute solo, alto flute solo that's very quiet, then you'll ride that in and
so most of it will be a blend between your sort of decca-tree and your intermediate.
Yes,
mics.
absolutely. It tends to be.
And
absolutely.
how's the phase coherence between all this stuff? Because it must be awful to sort of.
It's it just works really. If you choose the right microphones and put them in the right place, then you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
It's just it just works really, because the decca-tree is designed for that anyway. You kind of don't tend to worry about it. It's it's one of those kind of magical things.
Yeah.
It just works. And when you work in surround sound, of course, then that's different again. But we always, of course, listen in stereo, and also generally a quick mono check as well for the really old tellies to check it doesn't sound too horrible.
Yeah.
But
so you never listen in surround when you're recording an orchestra?
No, I always try to. Yeah, it sounds better. Yeah. It's much more impressive.
Yeah,
it's much more impressive.
Well, I was very impressed when I.
It's just it just gives you a sense if you were standing in the room. You know, stereo is fantastic, but if you can record in surround and you can monitor in surround, then why not? And also, a lot of the things we do now, a lot of the projects I do, I often, for like people like Klaus Bedelt, I'm doing a whole range of WWE films for an American composer called Jim Johnston. And they just take my Orchestral 5.0 mixes, so I have to listen to surround to mix it like that. So that of course adds pressure because you're doing a live mix, but makes it more fun as well. Yeah, makes it more fun because you have to make the decisions, you have to make production decisions there, and you know.
So a surround. So excuse my ignorance, but a surround mix of a cinematic orchestral recording. Yeah. Where are you? What, are you the conductor, or are you the
generally
audience,
you're you're somewhere between the conductor and the audience.
Right.
You're the front row, but a bit higher up. You know what I mean? You're kind of it's
sort of ideal.
Yeah, it's kind of like front row.
So what do you put behind?
Generally, just two ambient mics. So two microphones that are about 10 meters high and 10 meters high. Maybe not quite that high. It's probably a bit high, isn't it? But I'm trying to think how high that is. But two high microphones that in the hall work perfectly because they're there. And then you have, I mean, for the very basic setup, it's the tree into the front left speakers, left and right, the front speakers. Outriggers go left and right. The ambience go in the surround speakers. And that's a good starting point. And then,
and if you've got a solo, does that get panned all the way to the front, or do you pull it back a bit?
It's kind of use the intermediate mic so it doesn't get too in your face, unless it needs to be in your face. That's a style decision. Then it's kind of, it's all about being a conductor really. A little bit about 3 or 4 meters behind the conductor and about 2 meters, and being a very tall conductor. Yeah. Let's say like 4 meters behind the conductor and 4 meters tall. That kind of position really.
Right, I see.
Almost like if we were just recording it with a stereo pair, almost where you'd put the stereo pair, really. Yeah. That kind of thing. Yeah. You don't want to be too on top of the orchestra, but you don't want to be too far away. Well, you move the microphones until it sounds great, basically. Yeah. You balance it on the tree. That's your main sound. Yeah. And then you just add.
How often? I mean, do you ever record sections separately of the orchestra?
Often.
And overdub the.
Often, yeah. Like if we're doing a solo, we wouldn't just record the one mic. You'd record the close mic, the intermediate mic, the tree, the ambience, and the outriggers.
So you hundreds of tracks.
You do sometimes end up with lots, yeah. But then because you have to record it for surround. So if you've got a flute, for example, you need to be able to hear it in surround. Otherwise, it just doesn't blend in with the whole orchestra.
But do you ever say if you've got a section, a cue that where everyone's involved, do you ever record the strings and then you record the brass and then you record the percussion, the harp?
Often we do. Some people like Hans Zimmer, the way they record is they will only have the string players there, then they'll only have the brass players, then they'll only have the percussion, and they'll have the winds. So, but often the trouble with that is balancing it then afterwards, mixing takes a little bit more time because you're having to.
You've got multiple mics.
Yeah, well that's fine, but it's in terms of the balance just doesn't necessarily work because you've got to automatically things are recorded at different volumes rather than knowing how loud everybody is. So where it's possible, you have the whole orchestra there, and then you tend to what tends to happen is you record the strings separately, then the rest of the orchestra together. Right. But you rehearse it once, so everyone knows how it goes. Yeah. They know how loud they need to play, and you say right. And then orchestra. Then you just play. Everyone sits there, and you say, "Right, strings, do your."
You leave them all sitting there.
Yeah.
Reading the newspaper.
Yeah, iPads these days. You see it amazing. It's like, what's the Wi-Fi password? But they'll.
So it's quieter than the leaves of the paper being
much
turned.
Quieter, yeah, exactly.
That
much quieter. So they'll sit there, and then record all the strings, and then that tends to be, or we can split it up more than that. But often it's just strings, and then the rest of the orchestra.
Oh, okay.
Because the strings are the kind of thing that need to. when the rest of the brass particularly are going for it, then they get swamped quite a lot.
So it just gives you the flexibility to be able to push the strings up
just a little bit more. Without
the brass up as well. Yeah,
because generally, if you're turning, the way I like to explain it to composers or film people is, I can turn things up, but I can't turn things down. Because when you're recording in a room like that, it is easy to turn things up because you've got the microphones you're not using.
Yes.
But you can't turn them down because you're using an ambience microphone.
Right, I see. And what does this do though for the noise floor? Because there's a bit of traffic going past the hall, isn't there?
Once in a while there might be.
And
yeah, occasionally. Well, the sirens you obviously just re-record.
Do it again,
yeah.
But if you've done it in 3 or 4 different sections, you've got 3 or 4 times the amount of.
You
noise
do,
floor,
you do, and this, for the samples we record, then that that's much easier because we can use. I record the Spitfire samples, which is a bespoke, and they're now also commercial library, but we used noise reduction for those.
Did they?
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. It's noise reduction. I give them a couple of different mic positions, and they use noise reduction on that, which works very well. You have to roll a bit of the low end off, and kind of, and that's that. And just when you're listening in a film, it doesn't really matter if you're going really pure for a classical thing, then obviously you wouldn't record it separately anyway.
No.
So it's kind of one of those things you can just about get away with,
Right.
as long as you're not stacking it up hundreds and hundreds. But a good, it's good. You have to get a good signals noise ratio, and it's all about making sure that you record it well, so that you're not. You can't. You have to record it like it was on tape, essentially. Yeah. Which is great because I learned that way, and the modern way of just recording it quietly, I'll just use a gain trim and trim it up. You can't do that because the noise floor then will go through the roof. So you have to think about it in an analog world, which is great because you then have to go, okay, fine. Well, we're recording an analog desk, so let's pretend it's the tape machine is the Pro Tools is the medium. So
do you think you benefited from living through the tape years?
Oh, humongously. Yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt, I think really helped me absolutely because knowing that. Knowing how, because we still do record on tape.
Yes.
And so
Do you?
Yeah. We did some more samples for a project called Albion, which is coming out in a few weeks, and we recorded that through tape.
Right.
And it was great. I mean, it sounded amazing.
So do you get many sample library recordings to do then?
Well, I do this one called the Spitfire one.
Yes.
Yeah, which is now becoming quite a big business. And
yes, I've seen their website though. The harp samples.
Harp samples. They've done a commercial harp and commercial percussion, and they're just about to release this thing called Albion, which is a commercial orchestral library.
Okay.
But they also do. We've also done a whole range of fully orchestral in every instrument singly for bespoke for composers only.
Right.
That is. You have to be invited to join, and it's like the string patch is like £3,000.
Yeah.
The brass is like 12,000. So it's like super high end, super high quality, which has been great because that's a great thing to be involved in.
Yeah. You get us a copy.
Well, but you can get it's quite cheap actually.
Yes.
And it's got a full orchestra. It's going to be amazing.
Right.
We're hoping it's going to revolutionise this stuff. Who knows? But it's great. It's quite nice to be involved because when I mix projects now with a lot of the composers I've got, they've got them.
Yeah.
And it's like. Okay, great. Yeah, well, I do that, but also it means I know it's how I want it to sound.
Like, yeah.
Well, it's how I want it to sound as well. So it makes the mixing much easier. Makes the mixing much easier. Yeah, absolutely. I've just been mixing. Yesterday I was mixing the new series of Silent Witness.
Right.
And the same composer, a guy called Sheridan Tongue, been mixing a new ITV drama called DCI Banks. And he uses a lot of Spitfire samples. He's got other Project Sam samples and lots of other Alchemy and all those other things. And it's nice when you hear the ones I've got because we were discussing a suspended cymbal roll yesterday, and I was like, "Which one are you using?" It's like, "I'm using your one." I was like, "Okay, great, that's fine, that's allowed." So it's great to do those samples actually.
And have they been done in surround then?
I tried to persuade them to do them in surround, but there's nobody uses surrounds. There's no player.
No.
But what they've done now, which is great, is they've now released the newer samples in controls where you've got control of the tree, you've got control of the ambience, you've got control of the close mics. So if you've got, I don't know how to do it, but you can actually make it so there's the ambience mics come out of separate outputs, so you can actually make a kind of pseudo surround.
Yeah.
It's all balanced as if it should be done in surround. So yeah, essentially they are
amazing.
So they're amazing. They do sound great. I'm very Well, I will say that, but I do think they do sound really good because they're using the hall, and I've given I deliberately chose mics, not for album but for the rest of it that had a very good signal noise ratio, very quiet mics, so you could hopefully wouldn't be too much noise reduction, but then balanced it as if I was it was my sound. So basically, so it's like, it's a true proper orchestral film sound, and then if you can turn that into surround, then great.
So they're not going to put you out of work though when everyone's
maybe. Well, I think you still need the musicianship, but they're designed. The Spitfire samples were designed for composers to demo.
Yes.
Because nowadays, film guys, they just need to hear. They can't. The days are gone where they used to be able to play. Elmer Bernstein used to be able to play it on the piano, and they go, or John Williams was playing on the piano, and they go, "That's amazing. We love it. You go away and do your thing." Now they have everything has to be signed off before you get to the recording stage, budgetary, and also because they're so control freaks.
No, I mean, it's not your problem yet, but presumably it's at some point they'll say, "Well, that sounds fine. We'll just use that."
Maybe, but I think they do, and that does happen on a lot of projects. But those projects would never have projects that
they would
record. But anyway,
right.
So. Well, but on the flip side of things, yes, it is doing me out of recording work, but also because I recorded them, people asked me to mix it.
Yes.
So, and I've got I've another part of my string to my bow is a service I call Mix It Yours.
Oh, yes, I was going to come on to
that.
Yeah,
but that works perfectly because I can go there and I can say, right, well, these samples are great. Use these samples in the future, or we're using them. Great, and so I've met composers because they've used those samples, they then want to use me to mix it. So, I'm doing that as a recording. But then also, I can also then say to them, well, look, let's record some musicians, and we can bulk it up with samples. And that's so you can get in there and suggest things. And all composers, despite what they may say, want to record real musicians.
I'm sure
they want to. They will use up, and they often do use up all their fee in recording orchestras or musicians or soloists or whatever.
Yeah.
To the detriment of their own financial thing because they want it to sound proper. And samples, they work, but they're not as good as real musicians.
No.
And you can't, get them to say, "Can you play this?" You can play, you can read a bit of music and differentiate it thousands of different ways, and depends on what's going on. So samples have a place, but. You've still got to know how to record.
Going back a bit, you mentioned you were doing something in 5.0. Why not 5.1? And what's that all about?
Tends to be, if you do a mix in 5.1, depending on who the double mixer is and who the engineer is, a lot of the time the double mixer will just take out the point one. I've spoken to a few double mixers and they're like, if you use it wisely, then I won't touch it. If you're using it too much, then I'll just take it away without even thinking about it. So I won't even listen to it. They'll just take it away.
Right.
So
it tends to get reserved for the sound effects.
Yeah. Well, it needs to be. It's a kind of it's an effect essentially. It's a low frequency effect. So I tend to put a bass drum in there if there's a big bass drum or really big bit of low end orchestra that needs to be bulked out. But I won't use it as a part of the sound. It'll be in addition. So and if I'm doing a 5.0 stem for somebody, then if it's just strings, for example, then there's really no need to put the 5.1 in. So it's after having one of the great things that I had when I was an engineer was on The Proposition, which was a first Nick Cave film I worked on with him. The Gerard McCann, who was a music editor, had to go, and I became the music editor after we finished mixing. Just happened to work out perfectly. He had to leave, and I went down to the dub, and I spent 2 weeks on the dub, which was, as a young kind of engineer, was perfect because I learnt how the music was used, the reasons for doing stems, because I always used to hate that and think this is pointless. We're wasting all our, we're here at 3 a.m. doing a stem, putting a bass drum separately to the orchestra. Why are we doing this? And suddenly it all became clear, and it was amazing. It was such a great experience. And today, because I had to do a quick remix, and I had all the stems to be able to do that, and also just a bit of dialogue or a bit of sound effect meant that we had to take the whole music out. Or in fact, they've got a stem, they can just take it out for like a half a second, or just a bass drum note that might be in the way of a, I don't know, like some bit of dialogue or some sound effect that is important to the story.
Yes.
And it was just like, and you wouldn't know, going back to what you were saying before, you wouldn't know. Sometimes we try and get finished sound effects, but you can't get finished sound effects when you're mixing an orchestra. So you have to kind of guess, and the stems give you that flexibility too.
I see. So Mix It Yours.
Yes.
TM.
Yes.
What gave you the idea for this?
Well, I was looking to see how I could help people out, and somebody just said, "We haven't got a budget to mix this.
Right.
Let's record it. What should we do about mixing it? Do you reckon you could come and mix it at my place?" And I was like, "Don't see why not. You've got some speakers. You know the speakers.
Yeah.
You know your room. You know."
And this was a professional composer.
Yeah. And I was like, "Let's give it a try. What have we got to lose? There's nothing. There's no reason to lose. I'm getting paid. You're getting, experienced pair of ears.
Yeah.
I've recorded it, so I know, how it should sound.
Yeah.
And I just thought, let's try it, and it worked really well. It was, I don't tend to throw my toys out the pram and say, right, well, there's a fridge in that part of the room. We've got to turn everything off. It's the idea is that we get a lot done. Yeah. And I don't start again. I don't kind of start and pull the phase down.
Presumably they've already got it to a certain
stage.
Because
they've been working to it.
You've just ruined that mix.
I know. But it's digital testing will be recalled. But the point is that the directors have heard it that way as well. Right, yeah. And the idea is to put a sheen on it.
Yes.
So sometimes it'll be stuff I've recorded. Sometimes it'll just be literally just samples, and I'll just go and mix it.
Well, what if they're mixing it in Sonar or something? Is it?
I just learnt it really. I've had. It was the best way of learning it. Logic. Didn't hardly know Logic until I started using it that way, and now I'm a pretty good. I've changed all the key commands so they're like Pro Tools ones.
Oh wow!
Because on one occasion I was mixing with Pro Tools and 2 different Logic rigs with 2 different composers, and they each had different Logic commands, and I was just like, this is doing my head in. Pressing play on one, it was just like, you are kidding me. So I changed them all. I've now changed them all so that the zooms and the play and record and step backwards and change velocities and all that kind of stuff, all the same key commands. But it's just a kind of case of being able to take their mixes and do it. And some composers even now use it as a compositional tool. They'll get me in before the end,
right,
and they'll get me in when they finish writing it, because they know they have to spend 4 or 5 times as long as I would making it sound good.
So you're mixing the demo before you even...
Well, not necessarily mixing the demo, but I'm mixing something that isn't finished.
Right.
So that A, it may not need finishing once it's been mixed properly, or B, it's much easier to just they're not hearing it right, and that's become a revelation for a couple of composers who get me in to do that, because if they were giving mixes to the dub or to the guys to work with and say, well, this is my music, how it's going to be, use it for the short term, and I'm going to give you 4 mixes later. Doesn't always happen. No. So if they can get me in and say, right, here's some tracks I've done, use these mixes, they're great, and then it saves some time.
So how does that work? Do you charge them your normal daily rate, or
yeah. Daily rate. I mean, for Sheridan Tongue, he lives in Cambridgeshire, so I get up at 7 o'clock, hire a car.
Right.
Last night I got back at midnight, so it's it's an hour and a half drive, but it's fine. I really enjoy it. You know, he leaves me to it. He doesn't even listen to the mixes anymore. Or he listens to it in the evening, but he will just leave me mixing all day long. And I can do about 25 minutes of music in a day, because I can just get there, and his template derives from my template. So every time I change it, I say to his assistant, right, put that into his template, and so then I'm not mixing so much. I'm not having to start from scratch every time. I've got all my sounds in there. If I want a delay, I can just do that. If I want a kind of phaser thing, I've got that in the thing. Or reverbs, I've got 10 different reverbs in there, so I can literally just run it and go, okay, I want a bit of this reverb, I want a bit of that reverb. Right, I've got some faders there, and it's made me. I've used different speakers every different day. It's different speakers. I can take my Channel X now, which I can if I need to. But Sheridan's got some great Adams speakers,
right.
And I just use what take them, or I use what people have got. And you have to be slightly kind of not so prima donna about it.
Yeah.
But the service you're giving the client is great. And then then when there's a budget to bring it to the studio, we go, well, how about we do this one at Air? Great. And it gives them a foothold into Air, which is great as well, because they know me by that point. They know what the studio might be able to do, and if we can record it, if we can just record it at Air. But the idea is to give them another set of ears, experienced set of ears, and not blow their budget. Because often they haven't got a budget. That's exactly it. So if they can pay for me for a couple of days, and save their budget for being able to pay their rent, for example, then then rather than having a studio, obviously it's taking things away from the studio. But again, there would be things that never came into the studio. Because they people just mix it at home.
Absolutely.
And so
So the other exciting concept on your website is remote record.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
you're full of ideas.
Well, that's kind of borrowed from just people doing it. But it's a good name catcher. Again, happens a lot these days. I did a film with Henry Jackman last week called Man on a Ledge, and that was strings. And on the first couple of days, they had a guy come over from America, but the rest of the time we did it all remotely. So we had a what's it called? It's a plugin on Pro Tools that syncs it all up with MIDI timecode. So you can. It'll come to me in a minute. That's why I can't remember what it's called. But you have basically the mix going into this plugin,
right?
Which is called. I can't remember. Oh no, I'll remember later. Tweet me later. So you have that, and then that also that locks up to the record machine,
right?
And that just plays in sync. So and then at the other end you have the same bit of software, and you can then sync that up to the video. So you can basically be in sync.
Wow.
It has a few seconds delay, but it's incredible.
Amazing.
So you can have that. So you can be in sync with the picture, and I just do a stereo mix that goes down the pipe.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do it less. You can do it more crudely with that, with just a bit of software that just makes an MP3 stream.
Yeah.
And then you don't have the synchronization, but the synchronization is fantastic.
It's
so you can, and then we have that for the audio, and then what I like to do is differently to some people is actually just have a Skype for the audio, and then that goes straight up the desk, and in and out on a button, or then on a mute button that goes to the conductor.
Right.
And then the people can speak, in Skype time, directly from their from their laptop to the conductor, and he can speak, and it works brilliantly well.
Right.
It works brilliantly well. So you have the Pro Tools doing the nice sound, and if something goes wrong with that as well, then you can always quickly just flick something going down the Skype so they can hear. For Doctor Who, for Murray Gold, we do that. Tend to just use Skype.
Wow.
Because he's busy doing other things. He just wants to be able to turn it on, listen for 15 seconds, approve it. Great. He can just do that on Skype, and that's a bit lo-fi, but it works.
Yeah.
It works because he trusts me to know the sound of it. He just wants to be able to hear the music part of it. So it works really well.
So Murray's one of your main people you work with, isn't he?
Yeah, he was one of the first people who I started working with.
Yeah.
Started mixing some tracks for the second series of Doctor Who, and then from then on we've started. He has we have for Doctor Who we have kind of two recording scenarios. We have the National Orchestra of Wales, which we record three times a season.
Right.
And Jerry O'Riordan records those because he always has done since the beginning of Doctor Who reoccurrence. But now I go down and I produce those sessions because I mix and record and mix all the other London sessions. We call them, which may be about 5 or 6 of those a year, and then that's so because Murray lives in New York, so he likes me to go and produce it, and he then is down on Skype. So we do that like 3 times a year. We've got that next week, in fact. Right. And tomorrow we've got a small London session which I do record and mix, which is like for maybe 17-piece string and piano. And
so this is incidental bits of
music, yeah. But for Doctor Who, I'm also the music editor on that as well. So I go down to the dub and do that and look after it for Murray, really. Yeah. So quite heavily involved in Doctor Who. Yeah, a bit different from in the 70s when it was a bloke with a moog. Yes, somewhat different. But it's a bloke with an orchestra now, isn't it? But then, actually this series is bit more electronic, kind of creeping back in again. It's not quite so bombastic orchestra. And who does that? So does Murray do that himself? Or? Yeah, he writes it, and then a guy called Ben Foster orchestrates it and conducts it. Right. So. And Murray puts the squeaky noises on? He puts the squeaky noises on, and adds samples and guitars and all that kind of stuff. Emails them back to you to... No, he tends to... Actually, I tend to email him the mixes, the orchestral mixes, right. And then he does everything else himself. Oh, okay. He puts it together. Yeah. But then also what he'll do is, for the dub, he'll give me stems of things, so that I can tweak things in the dub. So you do the dub of Doctor Who as well, do you? Yeah, I don't dub it, but I go to represent the music, yes. Yeah, to represent the music, which that's exciting. So that's nice. So where does that get done? That does in Wales, in BBC Wales. Right. So that's at the moment that's a once a week trip for the next few Thursdays. Wow, which is great. And so you get to meet the execs, and you get to put up a good fight for the music in certain cases. And then, but if not, I can then take down, and if there's a little change that needs to be made, because Murray tends to write the music, and the execs don't get much of a chance to listen to it until, because there's so much music. There's 13 episodes, 45 minutes of music in an episode. Amazing. Murray just has to write it without any distractions, so he writes it, and then I can tweak it.
How do you find time to be on Twitter all the time?
When Logic crashes, or when I'm printing a mix generally. Because if you're doing a film score, like yesterday I mixed 25, 30 cues, and there's only so much time you've got to give yourself, because there's such a lot of music to record. It's like I did like 30 minutes of music I think yesterday, about 14 hours. So it's like when you're printing the mix or when Logic's crashed or you're opening it up, then it's like, because they're quite big Logic sessions. So when they're opening up, it's just like, okay, that's switch on for 30 seconds. Yeah. Because I work quite fast as well. I don't like to get bogged down in a mix. No. If it's not working, I'll stop and go something else. And this if I'm doing a big mix that I've got like 4 or 5 days to mix 50 minutes of music, then great. Like let's start early, let's finish early. Let's start at 8 o'clock in the morning, finish at 7 o'clock in the evening, have a life. So you've got that, you have that. I think it's really important to have that differentiation. So I love to get up and work early. My wife gets up early, so I can get up. I can get to be here.
Having children.
Well, yeah, right. But also if I can get so much more done in the morning. Awake, we're designed to be awake when it's light. So get up when it gets light, come into work, get it done, do a couple of hours, have a quick bit of breakfast, get then till lunchtime, and then you've got so much done by lunchtime. And then if you need to go late as well to catch up, then you can do that. But I'm a big believer in starting early and then trying to have some semblance of an evening. If you just go for a drink with your clients, or if it's like get home and spend a couple of hours with your loved ones, then great. But there's if we need to do a long day, then absolutely fine, not a problem. But if we do an early start, we can get so much done. So that's I like to work fast. It's a case of if it's not working, scrap it, start again. I don't tend to do that many recalls. It's like if it's not working, if for some reason it's not worked, then we'll start again because there's a reason for it not working. So let's do it. But of course with Pro Tools it's all recalled anyway. So that is nice being able to go away from something and come back to it. So if you can do it twice, for example, if you do it fast once, then come back and then tweak it. It's great. Yeah. But like Sheridan last week, he got me in to do it early, so he did some essentially the demos, titled them up, and then I came back, and because they were almost there, it was great because you could then mix them properly rather than just having to do a kind of a 90% mix. With mixing, it's 90% of the time it takes you're getting to the last 5% takes an exponential amount of time basically, isn't it? You can get to 90% pretty quickly, and then the last 5-10% take an exponential amount of time depending on how much budget and how much time you've got. And generally only I'm going to know the difference. Yeah.